I'm Tim Egan. I'm here at Mead Botanical Garden at the site of a habitat enhancement project that we've got going on. With me is Larry Martin with Orange Audubon, Catherine Bowman with the Florida Native Plant Society, and Ron Blair also with the Florida Native Plant Society. Catherine, you want to tell us a little bit about the habitat enhancement you've got going on here?
Sure, Tim. As you can probably see from where we're standing, this is a pretty high elevation part of the site, and it slopes off towards the creek, towards the east and the northeast. So this is an area where the soils are excessively well drained, and this, you can see from the longleaf pine, would be an area where there would have been longleaf pine, turkey oak, sandhill kind of habitat like you might find out at Wekiva, where there's widely spaced longleaf pine and underneath them a dense herbaceous layer that changes throughout the year and has a lot of grasses and wildflowers and things. So the Tarflower chapter has been working here. Ron has done some design work to lay out some basic planting areas, and in 2013 we started planting this area because it was the most open with species that would be appropriate for the longleaf pine, turkey oak, sandhill. So we've been adding some young trees that will form some patches of canopy, but mostly we want to keep it open, and by taking out just the few invasive exotic trees that are down here, that will help to open up the canopy and allow us to plant some more herbaceous and low shrubs that will then provide some diversity and provide better forage for birds in particular in the breeding season and in the winter.
Especially for the migration, the fall migration, should get some more buntings and stuff like that in this area if we have those kind of plants.
That's great. You know, when we take trees out in the garden here, Larry, we often it's often misunderstood by the users of the park and sometimes the birders. They think that we may be damaging the environment. Do you find that the native trees are better for birds in the long run?
In the long run, yes. In the long run, while the birds will, in the fall, the robins particularly, who there are bunches of them around here today, like the berries on the camphor tree. But if you get some good oaks and stuff, the native trees, they do support a broader range of birds than the camphors. I mean, the camphors are pretty much one or two species at all. But those big oaks and stuff, they get full of insects and they get full of caterpillars and stuff, and that brings in a lot of the warblers or insect eaters and caterpillars. So in the long run, it'll really enhance the birding environment here.
That's great. Well, we appreciate your input on helping us avoid impacts to the migration and to the nesting activities of the birds. And that's going to go a long way to making the users of the park comfortable about what we're doing here.
And I'll be able to explain it when I do my bird walks in here in April. I'll have a lot of chance. Hopefully something will be going on we can point to and say what's going on here.
And the Tarflower chapter will continue to be involved as replacement trees are added for the ones that you take out, the ones that are appropriate for this kind of soils and soil moisture. And then there'll be opportunities for volunteers to come and help with some other plantings of flowers.
Well, a lot of people ask me that the tree's green, it's healthy, isn't it better to leave it? Can you explain a little bit why the non-native trees are damaging or harmful to our environment and why we should?
One of the things that we see in this area, particularly with where we have the camphor trees, the large spreading camphor trees, is that they really contribute to the shade. They are also allelopathic, so that they don't allow a lot of other plants to grow under them, and we need in this area where we started, the reason we started this area was because there are gopher tortoise in Mead Gardens, and there was no refuge for them. So these plantings have provided areas where they can, if there's hatchlings, they can have a place to hide. And we've also added in a more diversity of herbaceous things that provide the forage for the tortoise. So by removing the canopy, keeping it more open, we can have spread and diversity that changes throughout the year and provides seeds and nectar for the birds and for the tortoises and for butterflies. We have lots of pollinators here that we're attracting with the new plantings. Another reason that we want to remove some of the canopy and replant with some of the natives is that in this area there would be primarily the longleaf pine as the dominant canopy, and underneath there would be some xeric oaks and some smaller trees that would just occur sporadically. So that is what we were trying to replicate here when we're introducing these other species.
Well, we're high and dry right here, but part of Mead Botanical Garden sits on Howell Branch Creek, and these non-native trees that are heavy cedars,
Oh, yes.
that creek can carry those seeds down to other natural lands
Yes,
that
you're right.
are being managed for natural habitat. So that can be a big impact that we can prevent if we take those trees out here while we have the opportunity.
And as Larry was mentioning earlier when we were talking about the wetlands, a lot of those seeds are eaten by birds and dropped in this area as well, which increases what we have to remove underneath. And the city, we're so pleased to see, has done a really good job of getting rid of the skunk vine, but the skunk vine has been a very attractive thing to birds, and they've dropped the seeds throughout the uplands here as well. So overall, reducing both the vines and the herbaceous and the canopy species that are non-native is really going to continue to improve the park's habitat.
Well, I'd like to add that as we reduce the seeds from the invasive exotics, by planting the natives, we're actually bringing in more seeds. And what we're starting to see in this area in particular is a spread regeneration, natural regeneration of plants, so that we no longer have to plant new plants. They're starting to spread on their own and maintain themselves as a population, a small population. Also, another consideration, since this is a botanical garden, is that ultimately we're looking for something that not only provides habitat, but provides an aesthetic for the people who visit the garden. And that can be difficult to appreciate in the early stages of this sort of work. And even more difficult perhaps in winter. This is not the time of year for this particular habitat type, but it will be noticeable in the years to come, particularly in the fall season when we'll see more flowering plants as we progress forward.
Well, that's a great point, and that really ties into what we're trying to do with the enhancement and restoration effort. As we remove the seed-producing adult plants in the park, in the garden, we're starting to reduce the number of seeds, just as you're increasing the seeding of the native plants. And eventually that's going to get us closer to a natural condition. It's probably going to take a while. It's going to be an ongoing process for some time, but do you think that this is eventually going to get to where it mimics a natural habitat?
I think it is going to mimic a natural habitat. Catherine and I don't necessarily agree on the concept of restoration, and what we see it as an ongoing, we agree on it's an ongoing process. So although we may not ever get to what we might all agree is a restoration, it will over time look more and more like a natural community and function like one.
That's great. Well, I found if you ask the same question to 5 biologists, you'll get 5 answers and they'll all be right. So,
And I think it's important that once you get habitat established up here, the educational opportunities to get people with some signage and stuff like that, so that people know what they're looking at and appreciate the different types of habitats that we can have in here.
That's very true, Larry. And we found that with volunteers, the more we let people know what we're trying to do here, the more volunteers we have. We have community volunteers, we have school volunteers.
yeah, there's a lot of educational activities going on here in the garden. Mead Botanical Inc. runs a summer camp that teaches a lot of the local youth about the habitats and ecology of Florida. Larry's helped get the word out to his fellow birders about what we're trying to accomplish here in the garden. And the opportunities the city's looking to take advantage of are really tremendous. We're going to be moving downslope, down the hydrologic gradient towards the creek, and as we go, Catherine can explain how the habitats change and vary depending on soil, moisture, and other conditions in the environment.
That's a good idea, Tim. We can probably go down and stop maybe halfway and look at some differences that we see down there.
Okay, great. We moved a little closer to the creek. The ground looks a lot the same, but I guess the soils are different here, and the types of trees that are growing here have changed. Can you explain us what's going on here?
Of course, we don't know exactly what would have been here 100+ years ago. We have a lot of the historic aerials to look at, and we could see that the canopy was still fairly open. But coming down slope, before we did any extensive additional plantings, what we would do is we would dig soil pits, we'll look at the soil profiles, compare those with the soil maps for the county, and can already see that we're downslope quite a bit from where we were up there on the Sand Hill corner, although the soils are still dry, and we have still the sand live oaks as an understory tree with the pines, but we're starting to get a lot more cabbage palms, and then regular live oaks are coming in down here. So this might have been an area where there was, say, scrubby flatwoods, and then maybe transitioning a little bit farther down slope to maybe a mixed hardwood community, where you can see every now and then that there are pignut hickories and magnolias, and that would have been the transitional stages going down towards the creek. So when we're looking at replacement trees for this area,
Right.
probably add in more diversity by choosing plants that would be representative of those additional communities.
Right. So in Florida, it doesn't take much of an elevation change to change the habitat type.
No, it certainly doesn't. Maybe just half a foot for it to be wetland or non-wetland, or right, just a few feet.
Larry, they're going to be adding a lot of shrubs in here. This has been maintained as an open field almost, historically, or at least for the last several decades. How is that going to affect the birding in this area?
I'm really looking forward to that, because I've been lobbying to try to get some of these little clusters to allow the seedlings to grow in there to provide cover for the birds. And if we start putting it in on purpose, rather than just not killing it mowing all the time, I think that's a big step in the right direction.
Great.
That's true. I would love to see some more shrubs and things like more plums or hog plums to provide some low ground cover for those lower ground nesting birds, like brown thrashers, I think,
Yeah.
are one of those. Things
They
that
love feeding in leaf litter.
gray
and-
catbirds that maybe
catbirds and
would be
stuff.
up under the shrubs. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Great.
We had a couple of years ago, we had a Swainson's warbler down in a little cluster of azaleas down here, and they
Oh.
really liked that little.
Closed
That
area.
closed
Protected.
area there.
A little refuge. Yeah.
So that was a lot of fun. That was a rare bird for here.
Move on down slope.
Yep, sure.